Hi everyone, this is Britton here. And I wanted to talk about that tonight because I think you're seeing this. I think finally you're seeing this because something crazy happened. Okay, and by the way, the question I'm answering tonight is on history curriculum. Where do you find, I think it was Brenda who asked, where do you find a good history curriculum that teaches the truth to your kids? I'm gonna get there. And then the second question, I forget who it was, but was saying that, I don't know, maybe it was you, Blanca, I forget, but saying that their son was asking questions like, what is my perspective of the current events, what's going on in this country, based on the history, my understanding of history. So I want to kind of tie those into today. But in this book, Revealing School, it's funny, I had this homeschooling guru. She's really big, she reviews a lot of books. She read this book and she was really offended by one chapter, and it's basically where I said that there's one party rule in America, and pretty much around the world, but there's one party rule in America at the top, which means the head of the Republican Party, like the head leadership, and the Democratic Party, they're basically the same people. You could flip them. I mean, their policy, they say different things, okay? And there's a purpose to it. They say different things, but they're basically working for the same people. It looks like a two-party system, but it's a one-party cabal, okay, that runs America, that founded America. And again, if you're new to this, it's going to seem crazy if you haven't read my books. I back up everything that I say, and this isn't something I just saw on YouTube. I want you to understand this. I put it together over years, and it's been discovery, okay? It's been a long journey, okay? And I've written, by the time this thing's done, it's going to be like 2,000 published pages, okay? It's very big. Revealing School was 500, and I was just scratching the surface. I didn't really know what was going on. But anyway, she was reviewing this book, and she was so offended because I suggested that Republicans and Democrats at the top are basically the same party, that the entire system is rigged, okay? At any rate, let me just go through it really quickly, okay? So we had Jimmy Carter. He was a radical liberal socialist, right? And then after that, we had Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan's the great conservative. We all love Ronald Reagan, except he wasn't a conservative at all. He was a rabid liberal. He was a total Marxist leftist. The only thing that he was a capitalist. And I've talked about that in other videos. I hate to rehash all of this stuff. The only thing he was a capitalist because they want... Oh gosh, I don't even know where to start with this. Okay, basically he was only a capitalist. Okay, but everything else, he was absolutely a liberal. Remember, he legalized, I think it was like 11 million illegal immigrants into this country, which gave California a huge voting block, gave them a power over a lot of other states, and they've done that in New York. So those two major immigration centers, they legalized all those. That was Ronald Reagan. He signed and proposed restrictions on guns, so that he was the first governor in America to legalize abortion. So every other state followed suit after California. And abortion, you don't know where the history comes from. You think it's like Roe versus Wade and stuff like that. No, it started when the Soviets, the evil empire, the Soviets took over. It's the same party, guys. The first thing that they did, nobody had even heard of abortion being legal. As soon as they came in, there was no fault divorce and abortion. Like that was the Soviet model to destroy the family, okay? As soon as Ronald Reagan, out of 50 states, he's the first governor to legalize abortion in his state. That was before Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade made it legal for the nation, but states were already going ahead with that. He did that. He also legalized no-fault divorce, which is the same thing as no marriage. I think I talk about that in the next book. But if you can dissolve a marriage for any reason you want, you essentially are a boyfriend and girlfriend in the eyes of the law. There's no such thing as marriage. Okay, so Ronald Reagan did that. Ronald Reagan did a whole bunch of other stuff, okay? Ronald Reagan was a really bad dude, but I used to love him in college because I bought into that narrative that there's right and there's left, and if you were a Republican, you were good, and Ronald Reagan was a conservative, but as I studied this guy, I'm like, oh my goodness, he was a bad dude. Ronald Reagan is a fraud. He was a Hollywood actor, and he just played the part very well, very well. Really bad dude. And it's really important. You're going to see it. I'm going to get through these presidents. I'm going to show you what just happened in your country. You just witnessed it, okay? Then after, Reagan, we have Bush. Reagan was still pretty popular, okay? Everybody voted for him. I think he won all, like I think it was 48 states. So he won a lot of states, very popular. Democrats loved him, and Republicans loved him because he wore the R. Then you got Bush, and Bush was supposed to be a conservative, but he talks about the New World Order and this new dawning, and he raises taxes, and he's a liberal, of course, so we're upset. We don't want that guy. Clinton comes in, of course, he's a New World Order liberal, and then after Clinton, we have Bush again, another Bush. What a coincidence, another Bush. Bush is a raging liberal. He takes us into war. He starts, I talk about this, he was the war on terror, which ushered in this police state that we have. And then, of course, he was no child left behind. That's so long ago. It was before Common Core. But basically giving the federal government more and more control over the individual schools. He sold it with conservative rhetoric, but it's a socialist Marxist policy. After that, we got Obama. But it's really important to remember who ran against Obama. Okay, it was McCain, John McCain. I think our eyes have been uncovered now. We know who John McCain is. He was a New World Order liberal. He's one of them. He's not one of us. He just wore the R because every few years they want us to have this sense that we have something to struggle for. We have somebody in the fight, but actually we don't. So they backed McCain. The media backed McCain. The cabal backed McCain. Right? He lost to Obama. That's okay. It didn't matter who won because they're both working for the same cabal. And then of course you have Mitt Romney. And you know who Mitt Romney is now too, don't you? And he runs against Obama. He loses. He's a loser. But we see who he is now. So even if he would have won, he would have been one of them. And then after Obama, we have this anomaly come in. And this is why I didn't endorse Trump for a long time, guys. And as he's parting, he didn't seem to stab us in the back that I can tell. So as he's parting, although his Supreme Court justices might as well been, I don't think he accomplished anything, but I actually believe that he was like a true American president. I think he was such a big celebrity and had so much of his own money. He broke the system. I think he actually broke through and was a real American president because when we were running, we had Clinton and it's just another Clinton. And it's his wife, right? Same cabal. And then we had another Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush was supposed to be the nominee. Everybody knew it was going to be Clinton and Jeb Bush. Somehow Trump beat them because he was just such a big celebrity, so popular. I think he's actually a pretty good speaker. Somehow he broke through just with his wealth, his power, his influence. He busted through, but they destroyed him, didn't they? They took him down. And I want you to remember all of the candidates. We had McCain, that was a Republican. We had Mitt Romney, and all of these other Republicans throughout the country, right? They're not really leaders. They haven't run for president. They're not running the party like Mitch. But remember, gosh, what was that guy, the Speaker of the House? Ryan? Ryan was a never-Trumper, and he was the head of the Republicans in the House. Mitch McConnell just stabbed Trump in the back, and he was a never-Trumper in the beginning. You have McCain. McCain stabbed us in the back of Obamacare. He was a Republican, but he was the deciding vote to overturning Obamacare. So that's why Obamacare continued. He was the deciding vote. And of course, he's the presidential candidate. And of course, all the Bushes are never-Trumpers. It's the same cabal. They hated Trump because he broke through, but it's a two-party system at the top. I really think it's important, and I'm getting to this, for your kids to understand the world that they're living in. We indoctrinate them with what we've been indoctrinated. We tell them things like we have a limited government because power to the people, and we believe in freedom and limited government, and that entire narrative is breaking down. We don't have limited government. We have tyranny. They tell you you can't even run your business now. You can't feed your family without them. They'll send you $600 or a few $1,000s over 6 months to feed your family, but you are not allowed to go feed your family. Small businesses, big businesses can because they run them. They're trying to destroy the small business and consolidate power. So that is tyranny. I mean, that's the highest form of tyranny. And yet we still go around talking about how we're a free people and we have freedom of speech. They just purged. Big tech just purged everybody from Parler. You witnessed it with your eyes. They huge purge. They don't believe in free speech, okay? So it's really important to understand current events, where you're living, what kind of government you have, and get past that narrative. So I'm all over the place today, but I want to address a few things that we've been taught as kids. And these are kind of hallmarks of our history and of our understanding of the world, and they don't hold up. So one is that we are run by a constitution. That's probably the biggest lie. And so many people are like, we just have to get back to the Constitution. That piece of paper is not going to save you. That piece of paper says that we have a right to life, right? Guaranteed. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right to life. They've killed 70 million babies in this country. I think it's about 70 million babies in this country. There's no right to life. Every single one of us passes under the blade. That Constitution is just a piece of paper. It can't protect you. The Constitution guarantees us the right to bear arms. That's not stopping them from coming to them. It guaranteed us the right to freedom of speech, right? The government can't limit our speech. And yet we realize we don't have freedom of speech. We're being pushed out of the platform, right? And there's no free commerce now. There was a MyPillow guy. He made the mistake of backing Trump, and now he's being punished. He's been kicked out of all these retail stores. Now we're told we have a free market system, but if you think the wrong way, if you don't repeat new think, which is they're constantly renewing it. It's progressing, right? It's tightening and tightening. If you don't follow the agenda, you're hateful. It's hate speech. You have to be banned now from the marketplace. We have no free system. Capitalism was a ruse, okay? The free market was a ruse. It's never existed in this country. It's always been run by a cabal of bankers. All right, and now, okay, but you're saying, wait a second, but the government's not controlling it, so it's okay. That's what this system was designed to do. in my opinion. And this is, guys, I know this seems so far out there, and you probably just got overwhelmed with all these conspiracy theories and none of it came true and you're totally disappointed. But again, if you've read my books, you know I'm credible, and I think you can see it with your own eyes, okay? So they designed this system in America, limiting the government. That's where I struggle with all of this. What's keeping them from dismissing the Constitution? Seems like nothing. Well, there is no Constitution. There's really no Constitution. They own the interpreters of the Constitution. So the Constitution doesn't protect you from anything. Okay, freedom of religion. There was a guy, he didn't want to bake a cake celebrating homosexual marriage because there's no such thing according to our religion. And they fined him in Oregon $130,000. My father lost his medical license. I don't know if you saw it, it was in the news a while ago. He lost his medical license because he's a doctor and he didn't think that the masks were effective. He thinks it's actually bad for your health. You're breathing your own CO2 in, and it doesn't filter, the mask doesn't actually filter COVID. Everybody knows that. It's too small. It's really just to stop you if you're coughing from projecting it, onto surfaces. And they took his medical license. So there is no Constitution to protect you. That's just kind of like it makes you feel good, and it makes you feel like that your salvation is in a piece of paper. But there's no such thing as a piece of paper ruling a nation. It's always people. It's always people with power. The Constitution doesn't protect you. What they did was really important because these people who founded America, not the Patriots, okay, they whipped, or the Sons of Liberty or whatever, that was just a movement, just like the Jacobins, okay? The Jacobins disappeared after the revolution. They always whipped these, Black Lives Matter, if they needed it to overthrow the country, they would overthrow the country, and then they'd probably persecute those people, and you'd think, oh, okay, it's gone away, but they raise up these people, and they create these narratives and stuff, but I'm talking about the people who actually funded these revolutions stuff. When they founded this country, they were coming from Europe, and they were dealing with kings, and these kings were going after them. The kings weren't persecuting the little guys like you think. It was really the bankers, it was the merchant class that were taking down the kings and going to war with them over there. And they wanted a place, a harbor, where they could be safe away from the kings, the power of the kings. They could have their own country. And they knew that they needed a system of government to manage the lower people, the peasants like us, right? But they wanted to make sure it never got enough power like a king so that it could actually rein them in. So they created this republic with limited government. It's just enough government to manage you, to shut your business down. It's just enough government to control you, right? Like if you get a DUI, you're going to go to prison for a while. Or if you commit fraud or sell drugs, you could go to jail for a long time. But it's not enough government to control them because they have so much money and so much power, and they're appointing these judges. Like you look at Soros, like he backs these prosecutors. So when his guy's time comes up, these prosecutors just refuse to prosecute him. Look at Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein. The guy was running a pedophile ring. He was discovered. I think he was given like 6 months in prison, but he was released for the day for work. So he just had to sleep in it, and they let him turn it into like a fancy prison, and he just slept there. It was like a resort prison. He got to bring all of his stuff in there, had a good time. And that was a rampant pedophile running a pedophile ring, right? And they slapped him on the wrist because that's the system. There's no justice at the top. They are above the law by design. It was never about equal. Constitution's going to hold everybody accountable. It was limited government, so it'd be powerful enough to manage and control the population, but not powerful enough to control them. If you have a guy like Trump, okay, we finally got it. Let's just pretend. I don't know 100% that he was a legitimate guy. When we left moderate conservative, so either party, they're just distractions to create these micro groups. Kind of. There's a purpose. There's a purpose to the two-party system. This is going to be a fun talk, and I'm delirious, so it'll be a fun one. It'll be interesting though. Okay, let's just go into that. Okay, because that I wanted to explain that at some point too. So why do we have a left and a right? Because they're contradictions. It's like this. I talked about it last week. When you go through the public school system, they teach you nonviolence, and you see people on the internet. They continue to regurgitate these things that have been put into our head, like violence is never the answer. Violence is never the answer, right? Every citizen knows that violence is never the answer. That's been programmed into us, even though our nation was founded through war, and every nation is founded through war almost. But that's okay. I'm not saying it's good or bad. But they say violence is never the answer. That's programmed into us. That's what they want for the citizenry, okay? Let's say that that's the left thing, okay? And then you have the right thing. And if you become a police officer or the military, the same government who runs the public schools that feed your kids violence is never the answer. Like I was in the military, we love violence. We talk about the violence of action as it's all about violence and killing stuff. And it's because we understand how powerful that is. So America teaches its citizenry to be sheep. and it teaches its guardians, its let's say it's wolves or sheepdog, whatever you want to say it. They give them teeth, and they teach them the merits of violence, right? And then these two don't understand each other. So you have these hippies that are like, you're evil, you're bad, violence is never the answer. These other guys are like, of course, like, what are you talking about? Like, it's my job to enforce the laws and use violence. And a great example of this is domestic violence, okay? This happens a lot, okay? So you have a husband, let's say, and he could do anything. I mean, he could grab his wife's arm now, okay? She tried to leave, he grabs his arm aggressively, okay? He has committed domestic violence. He's not allowed to do that, to control people. So the cops show up, and the wife, she gets hysterical because they're going to take her husband to prison. She starts acting up. She attacks the police officer, or she just refuses orders. The police officer's like, sit down, woman. She's like, no. What does he do? Maybe he sprays her with mace. Maybe he beats her with the club. He will use violence. He'll do the exact same thing that the husband's doing, right? He'll use violence to control her. See the system? And that's why it's confusing to people on the street. They're like, wait, this cop's doing violence, and violence is never the answer. Very confusing. They need both. So they train compliance. Violence is never the answer unless it's coming from the government. See what I mean? So they need both, if that makes sense. So they need a left and right. Sometimes the people who run this country want to raise taxes. Okay? And so they need a party that wants to raise taxes because they make tons of money off of inflation and the banking system. We'll get into that someday. Like the minimum wage, how they just kill it. The elites kill it and the poor get poor. If you look at California, one of the highest minimum wages, right, in the country. And they're like, they can't afford any houses or anything, but the elites are getting so wealthy. Okay, and then they come to a state like Idaho who has a low minimum wage and we have a lower cost of living, and they can just buy up everything. Okay, it's a cabal. It makes me so angry. And nobody knows how to debate it. Everybody's just like, it's bad for business. It's like, no, it's total tyranny. It's like why California has such a high GDP. Everything's inflated over there, but when they go to other states, they can just buy us out because their money's inflated. There should be a currency exchange between California money and Idaho money because we're on different minimum wages, which sets a different standard of living, okay. So that's why they need the left and the right, because sometimes they're going to contradict each other. Like governing people, they believe that you need to contradict yourself sometimes. And if you have that in one person, he looks like a hypocrite. But if you have a two-party system, and one likes to raise taxes and one likes to cut taxes or whatever, you have this one-party system, he raises taxes. Everybody on his side supports him because they're a part of that party, right? And these guys are all upset. Well, and you have a 50-50 split in America. They've done a miraculous job. How do you get almost 50-50? It's almost even. Every election comes down to like 49, 50%, right? It's a lot of times it's within 1 percentage point. So it's perfectly balanced, which means them, there's not many of them, right? Them, with their little bit of money and influence, they become the deciding factor. They can put their finger on either side of the scale when they need to raise taxes or lower taxes. So they control it because it's perfectly balanced. If it wasn't balanced, let's say 70% were Democrats and 30% were Republicans, right? They would lose control of the balance because then the Democrats could really become super powerful and they wouldn't be able to, all their money and wealth and power wouldn't be enough to tip the scale the other way, right? So by having it perfectly balanced, they can put just a little bit of pressure, a little bit of money into an election, and they can change it. Like if they want to go to war, they get the Republicans power, they can whip them in, it's patriotism and war and all this stuff, right? And they go to war with Iraq, and they make tons of money, and they took that guy down, Saddam Hussein, and we'll talk about that in just a second. They took that guy down. He opposed the New World Order, so they annihilated him, right? But at the same time, they were working up the anti-war party already, so they wanted to end it and bring it down, and they could. And it looks like it's these two opposing forces. Or you look like the hippie movement, right? These same liberals, like who support the Soviet Revolution, which is totally violent and everything like that, are over here opposing war, make love, not war, right? They're whipping that in because they don't want to engage in that war. So they can, in other words, those same. But then when that war's over, and we lost the Vietnam War, the hippie group goes away. But when we had like 9/11 and stuff like that, even the media, CNN, all those people were kind of backing that war, right? I hope that makes sense. So in other words, they need a war party, but if they don't want to go to war and the American people wanted to go to war, maybe it's their ally or they don't want to go to war, they have another party that they can just put a little weight on the scale, and then the anti-war party becomes more powerful and we end the war or we don't go to war. But if they want to go to war, they can put a little weight on the scale, and now the Republican Party becomes, remember, they're only dealing with 0.5% of the population usually. In these elections, they put a little bit of money and weight on the scale, and now we don't go to war, or we go to war, okay? So that's why they want both systems in place, because that's how they control us. And that's why they give us these two versions of education. They give their police officers the merits of violence. They give the citizen the merits of peace no matter what. peace, nonviolence, and they tell us that that's empowering, and they give us stories about Gandhi and stuff like that. What about Julius Caesar and all those guys that use violence? They're pretty powerful people too. You're saying violence doesn't work? Sometimes it does, but we're not allowed to think that because we're the sheeple. Okay, so free market system, that's probably the biggest lie. And they have socialism. Remember, they have communism, socialism, and they have the free market system. They invented both those, capitalism and communism. They use them at different times for different things, but they continue to consolidate their own power, okay? And the reason I'm talking about this right now is you just saw that. You just saw what they did to Trump now. Trump can't bank, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, how are all these banks like in on this? Like, I thought it was a free market system and it was just about profit, but all of a sudden they won't. There was a MyPillow guy and he supported Trump. Now he's been kicked out of all of the stores. He can't sell his pillows. I thought it was a free market system. And how are all of these stores that just regular stores that you used to going to, like Bed Bath & Beyond or something, how come they're all in on this? How come they're all part of this cabal? How come all of the social media companies are run by the same people? Like YouTube and Facebook and Google and all that stuff, they all kicked them off. There's not one conservative platform. They all kicked him off at the same time? Yeah, it's a cabal. It's a money cabal. You think these are individual companies and all that stuff, but when you follow it up, it's a handful of people. They tend to be prep schoolers. That's how I phrase it. It's more than that. There's a cabal within the prep schools. They made the prep schools as like a ground for their kids and recruiting and stuff like that, but it's a much tighter than 0.5% of the population. I went to prep school. I'm not any part of it. I know lots of other prep schoolers that got a good education. They're doing well in life, but they're not part of this inner circle, the cabal. Okay, and now what you're going to see is infamy. And so this is where we're getting into current events and we're getting into history, and it's really important. I talk about in this book, Revealing School, and I really do a good job, I think, starting to open your mind to the false history that you've gotten. I don't dare venture to subtopics, and even in this book is funny because there's things I'm like, oh, I wish I could rewrite that part a little bit, because I use that guy as like this example of infamy, and now I know a little more about him. I know why I've grown up hating him. So I wanted you to see this you're seeing this in real time with the MAGA movement. MAGA movement, Trump is gone. They're going to erase him now. He can't do business. You can't sell his merchandise. It's hate speech on Amazon. He's being pulled down from the marketplace. Anybody who mentions the name almost, in a positive light will be purged. That whole movement's being purged. We're all being called white supremacists. Okay, now I want you to think back in history. Okay, we're all being called white supremacists. We're going to be demonized, and that's going to go down in history. These people control the media. They control they control Hollywood. They're going to make movies about it, and someday, and they want us to deprogram. Yes. And they want us re-educated, okay? So they're gonna be teaching this in schools. Ocasio-Cortez was already talking about that, how we need anti-hate. But anti-hate just symbolizes like New World Order, like indoctrination, right? So they're gonna do that under the guise of we need to deprogram these people and show them how wrong they were. They used to do truth convention or commissions in other countries and stuff, and they'd have these sham trials and stuff, okay? And there was some about. And so MAGA, the movement, is gonna live in infamy. Your children's children, if they grow up in the public school system, someday are going to look back at that time when you had this genocidal. Some people, there was a guy recently said he was worse than Hitler. He was worse than Hitler. Not even just like Hitler. He was worse than Hitler. And if you use your brain, you live through it. We didn't go to any wars. The economy is doing pretty good. Like maybe he said some inappropriate things, but like you're like they're going to make him worse than Hitler. Okay. And when I started studying history, I started to see this other side, like true history, and you realize they've already done that to everybody. When you cross these people, you live in infamy. They destroy you, and it's tainted all of history. And so all of this history has been tainted. I don't have a curriculum I can recommend. You go to the Christian homeschool curriculums, they basically teach the same history. Not because they're lying, but because it's been taught to them, and they're regurgitating it. And it's the only history they know. They don't know, like, for example, they know that Hitler is the worst. He's the worst. He's a criminal. He's a mass murderer. He was a Satanist. He was sadistic. He was twisted sex life, all this stuff, right? They know he's the epitome of evil because he crossed the New World Order. But you've never heard of Gentrick Ugoda. In fact, I could barely find the guy on the internet. Look up Gentrick Ugoda. You talk about a Hitler, but he was their Hitler. He was their Hitler. So you've never heard of him. And he of course, slaughtered millions and millions of Christians. They think it was probably 10, maybe 20 million Christians in Russia. During the Soviet purge, okay? He makes Hitler, if Hitler killed 6 million Jews, he makes Hitler look like child's play. That's Gendrick. You've heard of Stalin. Stalin is evil. And you're like, wait a second, but he's a leftist. Why would they promote that? If you know the history, I'm going to reveal this in my last book, okay? Good and Evil. Stalin was a true communist, okay? Meaning he didn't believe in the left and the right hand. He only believed in the left, like he was a true communist. And he was also Russian. He wasn't international like these other people, like Trotsky and them, internationalists. He was a true Russian. And Stalin's an interesting character. I don't know if everything is true. I don't know what to believe anymore. If he killed all those people, I think he probably did. I think he was a true communist, a very evil dude, true communist. But the reason you know his name and not Trotsky is because Trotsky was their man. Trotsky committed the same atrocities. Trotsky was worse than Stalin. But you've never heard of Trotsky. I always say Trotsky and people are like, huh? They recently made a movie and like it was an apology for him. Not an apology, apologist, like a defense of him, showing that he had to slaughter all those people because whatever. It was like an apology for like a Holocaust of Christians. That's okay. You never heard those names, but you heard of Stalin. They hate Stalin, even though he's a leftist, because they're not true leftists, you guys. They don't actually believe in communism. They believe in control, and communism is their tool to overtake a government and take all of its resources. They justify it. It's going to the people, but actually it goes to them, and they manage it, and then they reorganize the debt, and then that entire nation becomes a debtor nation to these people. And they've done it in every country. They set up a federal bank, and that it's privately owned, and then that entire nation's GDP now goes to paying back interest, and it's printed debt. It's crazy how they take control. So when they really hate somebody, and they hated the Russians, they send the communists in, and they just pillage everything and take everything, and then they ship it back to countries like America, Wall Street, where their wealth is protected on these notions of capitalism and free enterprise, and the government isn't powerful enough to take it. Think about Donald Trump. He didn't take anybody down. He was the president of the United States, and he was so weak. He had so little power. He could barely keep himself out of jail while he was in office. These people are ferocious. They control everything, okay? So, we got the MAGA purge, okay? And I want you to think about that. This has happened in history. Everything that you know from history that lives in infamy, it's because it's challenged this movement, this new world order. One of them was the Confederacy. If you're watching this, the first video, you guys, you haven't seen me debunk. That's why I always have to reiterate all this stuff, because it's so out there, guys. And this is why on Blue Manor Academy will soon be moving, and I'll be teaching these classes. We have huge things coming, okay? We sold a bunch of our properties, and we have money coming in, and we're going to build this thing. It's going to be cool. We're looking at a new studio. It's going to be amazing, okay? So I'm going to start teaching. It just hit me because there's some stuff I can't teach your kids. I don't know it for sure, and it maybe it's controversial. I want you as the parent to decide what you want to teach your kids about World War I or World War II, but I can teach it to you, and at least open your eyes to another part of history, and then you can decide. So I just want you to know that this isn't necessarily, I don't necessarily want to teach all this to your kids. Some of this is controversial. It's going to get them in trouble if they say it to the wrong person, so we have to be careful. As far as my kids know, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. But as far as you know, we've already debunked that. The Civil War wasn't about ending slavery. Abraham Lincoln didn't actually free all the slaves. That's the biggest lie. And you're actually seeing it, by the way. You're seeing it because the leftists, where they're tearing down statues, they turned on Lincoln. And all the Republicans are like, what? He freed the slaves. It's actually, they're right. They're right. He was only a history. He actually didn't free the slaves. Read the Emancipation Proclamation. Don't believe your history book. Read the Emancipation Proclamation. He only freed the Southern slaves. But that's confusing because you think it's a war about slavery, but actually there are a bunch of slave states in the North. I think there are 4 or 5 slave states in the North fighting for the North. They don't think they're ending slavery. Oh, and Lincoln exempt their slaves from being freed. Those until the end of the war. They actually were freed, but at the very end of the war. So the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free all of them. Congress did later. The war wasn't about ending slavery. Okay, but you've learned this false narrative, and they hate the Southerners for opposing the New World Order. And if you watch any movies, every time you see the Confederate flag, you see some redneck hick, and he's stupid, and he's ignorant, and he's the most racist, bigoted person. They hate the South. They hate what that stood for, okay? And it wasn't about slavery. They just hate him, okay? They've turned that flag into a symbol of ignorance and stupidity. Okay, and if you want to know why the South, they call it the dirty South, and it was actually the aristocracy. It was like the elevated manners, and it was like the old order, right? And you had the industrial bankers and capitalists up north, and they're going to pillage the South. They pillage it. They come down there. All of a sudden, their currency, the Confederate currency, is worth like nothing. And they come down there and start taxing the Confederates, their farms and everything. and they don't have any money because they only have Confederate money, so they're broke. And so the industrialists take all their money. And it's not like poor black people could buy the land, the farmland, or anything. They don't have any money. So these industrial capitalists come down from the factories in the North, and they buy up everything for pennies on the dollar, and they buy the South. And then they take all of those slaves and are like, hey, we got jobs up north in the factories, and they pay them pennies. They basically just... It was even a worse form of slavery because they didn't even feed and clothe these people. So they end up living in slums, and they can barely make a living up there. And they actually create a free slave state, okay? And then they want that model for the rest of America. And that's what's happened over time. We become less and less free. At first, you were out of high school, you could provide for your family, or actually you used to work for yourself on the farm. You could provide it, and then eventually you couldn't, so you had to go to the factory. But a man can make enough in the factory to support his family. Now he can't. Now he needs a college education. He's got to get a ton of debt from the bankers just to get education, to get a decent paying job. But even that doesn't work now, so now his wife has to work, and they can barely get by. So we have people on welfare with 2 people working, and they're on welfare because we become so impoverished by these people. So they didn't end slavery. They ended a form of slavery, but they actually expanded it. And they took those slaves, like I said, up to the North, and then they turned into the dirty South. The South was so pillaged, and all the money was basically going from the South. Like the Southern capitalists were taking that money and just taking it right back up north. Like they were all lived up north. They were all like these industrial bankers, and they took over all the farmland and everything, and just impoverished the South. And to this day, they still make movies and just denigrate them. And now they want to tear down their statues and just make them pay for daring to oppose the New World Order. Okay? And when I grew up, I just want to show you this history that's been infused in our mind, the enemies. There's this guy named Rasputin. You probably saw him. There was a movie, Anastasia. I loved that movie growing up. It's still one of my favorite. Don Bluth is one of my favorite animators of all time. That is what the original idea, nation of, okay. What is the origin of the evil that is nation? We must rewrite our history. And white supremacists be called out. I have never heard this more often the last 4 years. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting there, Blanca. So, and I have to be very careful what I say because they're purging people like me. I have to be very careful what I say. And there's some things I can't say. I think you guys would reject it. I really want you to find it on your own. I try to it's here. You have to find it on your own. But I will get there. I'm going to get to the origin of this, okay? I just want to show you how it's been infused in your mind, this false education, and how they take their enemies and they make them your enemies in like curse words like Rasputin, okay? So Disney, I know it was Don Bluth animated it. I believe that Anastasia was backed by a famous guy, Spielberg. I think it was Spielberg backed that movie. And if you know who Spielberg is, he makes movies celebrating his history, like Fievel Goes West and Fievel Comes to America, American Tail. That's his history, and then he denigrates our history, our Christian history. So there's this guy named Rasputin, and of course, if you've watched anything in Hollywood, like in the movie Anastasia, he's a Satanist, he's evil. It was his curse on the royal family that got them all slaughtered and started the revolution. If you watch that as a kid, you think Rasputin is this monster, this villain, and he's responsible for the downfall of the Tsar. Rasputin was actually a priest. He was controversial. I don't know how much of it's true and how much of it's propaganda. I've come to believe it's mostly propaganda. But for some reason, I don't know if it's a miracle. I don't know what it was. The Tsar's son was a hemophiliac, I believe, with the blood disorder. And he was often sick as a child. And for some reason, Rasputin could calm him and could, they think, cure him. For whatever reason, the family believed that, and they kept him around, and he became the family priest. But he also became the center of hate. The communists hated him because it was like the church was whispering in his ear, and they hate the church, communists. They hate it. They're our arch enemy. So he becomes, because he opposed them, and he continued to encourage the Tsar to oppose these people. His name lives in infamy. They hate him, and they make movies about him. They made a recent documentary, and they showed him as a sex fiend, and he was engaged in pedophilia, and he was seducing these underage girls. And you're seeing this, you're like, God, he was a sick person, and he was a man of the cloth. Oh, and it makes you ill. And then you realize that's what they do to all of their enemies. I don't know, but my guess is, New World Order. And New World Order is kind of like a buzzword. I'll talk about that. But Rasputin, guys, Rasputin is not a villain. They've made him into a villain, and every kid who sees that believes it. And they made this documentary. These documentaries that the Hollywood makes, they're all propaganda. They take their enemies and they make them look like monsters, okay? They're all agenda-driven. So Rasputin's a good dude. Anastasia was, of course, killed by communists. She was She was butchered by communists. I think that they shot her and didn't kill her, so they end up stabbing her, and they just throw these, I mean, just savage, sick people. And then they're so sick and so evil, then they take their crimes and they blame it on Rasputin, the family priest, because they blame everything on the priest. We're going to get into that in a minute with the Catholic Church. Okay, Marie Antoinette. Let them eat cake. It's an infamous line. That was a propaganda slogan. They hated Marie Antoinette. They took her son from her after she was arrested. They tortured that little guy. He was 7 years old. I'm going to talk. I write about it a little bit in the book. If you've read Character, they torture him over the course of months. It's horrific. We know his sister survived it. She wrote about it in her diary and stuff. They ended up killing him, by the way. But before they kill him, they pull him out after a few months of torture, and they have him testify against his wife, his own mother, that his own mother was molesting him, and his aunt was molesting him. Anyway. That's the only one. I don't know why. I think it was because I was writing this thing. My son is 7 years old, and I think about like them doing that to a little kid and to a mother. And then they cut her head off for a crime of for all these crimes like molesting your own children. These people are sick people. So, and they're very bad people. And then they project. And they had this sham trial like they did in the Soviet Union to Marie Antoinette, and they cut her head off. They cut her son's head off. The only one that, or they killed their son, they tortured that little boy to death. The things that they did to him are just beyond comparing. He was 7, 8 years old. Tortured him to death. And the daughter survived because Napoleon ransomed her after he took charge. She was nothing. I mean, she's not an heir to the throne. So they gave her to Austria. That was her family in Austria. So they ransomed her. Okay, the Catholic Church. I want to get there. The Catholic Church is the archenemy of these people. They hate him. They hate him. In the Catholic Church. In fact, if you look everywhere they go, and they hate the Orthodox, they hate all Christians, they hate Protestants, but they hate the Catholic Church. And if you look what they did to France, like my whole life growing up, like I've been raised with English propaganda, even though I'm French, right? Because there's a unification, and it's a long story how French people are. We're not all English basically. We don't all come from England. There's a lot of French people here, and after the French and Indian War and then the Napoleonic Wars, there's a bunch of French and Spanish people that become part of this country, but our history, we always look back at England, and England hates France, especially after the Protestant movement. They become arch enemies. But at any rate, so pedophile priests. So when I was growing up, I mean, I remember telling people that, Catholics that, like, oh, priests are pedophiles, and I can't do it anymore. Like, I've repented of that, okay? I've asked God for forgiveness for perpetuating that. And it makes me sick because you read this story. I want you to think about, oh gosh, what's that guy? Saddam Hussein's son, okay? Watch The Devil's Double. It's a really inappropriate film, by the way, really sick. But of course, he's a pedophile. He's a sick, crazy, sadistic rapist. He goes around looking for little girls, okay? Because we went to war with that guy. We hated that guy. So we have to make, after he's dead, after we've killed the dude, we have to turn him into a pedophile, a sick, twisted pervert, and he will live in infamy because he dared to cross these people, just like we will for supporting the MAGA movement. Anybody that crosses these people, their name becomes a curse word, okay? So, pedophile priests. I want you to look into that. I want you to look into that someday. There was recently another priest. He's actually a liberal priest. He was accused of pedophilia. It's 40 years old. 40 years after the event. Now, how can you defend that? There's no physical evidence. There's no video evidence. It's just somebody accusing him. And if you know who these people are, that's what they do. Like the Soviet Union, they have these sham trials. They bring in these degenerates off of the street. Literally, there was a guy in Australia, this cardinal in Australia, was accused like 30 years earlier. You read the story. It was so crazy. And then was dismissed, and now they're recharging him for another crime for 4 years earlier, you know? But this guy was like a heroin addict. They find these people, and they call it false flag events. You see them in college campuses. It's like a Jew spray painting a swastika on her own door. Or some lesbian spray painting a swastika on her garage door. She was like outside naked, like bleeding. People think, oh my God, like, or you look at Jussie Smollett, okay? That is their mode of operation. That's what they do. They falsely accuse people all of the time, okay? So they find these degenerates, and there's part of the mission. Like, they believe the Catholic Church is evil. They're going to take it down, and they falsely accuse it. I'm not saying they're all false accusations. I'm just saying these are the same people going after them. And I know that's not popular to say because my audience is mostly Protestant and they tend to not like the Catholic Church. But we have to stand up to these people because they're actually starting to do it to the evangelicals. It's funny, it's never liberal churches. It's never liberal organizations. It's conspiracies to think stuff like that goes on in Hollywood. Anyway, you see what I'm saying? But it's always conservative Christians. They did the same thing to the Boy Scouts. I just saw an article the other day. They're going to start doing it to the Mormon Church, okay? This is their mode of operation. They want you to see your religious leaders, Christian religious leaders, as pedophiles. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't some actual problems with pedophile priests, and that'll be in my enemy book. It is scary. It is scary what has happened. They want to take that down. Their goal, their stated goal, is to get their man on the throne of Peter. Okay, they want the Pope. They want the Pope. I don't know if they have the Pope now, but they want the Pope. And there's a secret society it's very like the Freemasons, but it's like stated goal. And this is like 200 years ago. It's like, we're going to get a Pope, our Pope. Okay, so I want you to think about that, guys. They denigrate these people. Be very careful before you attack other Christians. The Boy Scouts, same thing, synonymous with pedophilia now because they hated that organization. That organization stood for Christian values. It's done, dude. They broke that. They broke it. Okay, they broke Boy Scouts. They do that to all of their enemies. They all become pedophiles, okay? I've looked into this. I just want you, recently, you saw one in Pennsylvania. That was by Josh Shapiro. That name should be familiar because that was the Pennsylvania Attorney General, ran the Pennsylvania election. Then there was another guy in Michigan, or a girl in Michigan, same deal. Another voter fraud. She's the Attorney General, organizing relation thing. They're the same people. There's another one, and they all use their, like, the Pennsylvania indicted the Catholic Church, and they're like, oh, it's like a mob, so we're going to indict him over here. And then they did it in New York, and then they just did one in Colorado. And you can't believe this, guys. I don't know this ahead of time. I don't get this from a website. I get it from a hunch. And I was like, I'm just going to see if they're part of the same cabal. I'm just going to see. There's not a lot of them. I'm just going to see if they're part of the same cabal. And I look it up, and sure enough, I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. So you have to do your own research. Look up these attorney generals. They have an agenda. They hate the Catholic Church. It's their arch enemy. Going all the way back to the French Revolution, going all the way back to the Glorious Revolution. Okay. All right. We talked about Hitler and Stalin. I don't want to defend those guys because that's a hate crime. You can't defend those people at all. I think that they were bad people. I think that he was actually fascist, Hitler. Stalin was actually a communist. But remember, that's not why they're hated. That's not why you know their names. You know their names because they dared to challenge the New World Order. Okay, when we overthrew the Soviet Union, okay, we set up that whole thing, not me and you. The bankers in Wall Street, remember this name, Schiff. There's a guy named Jacob Schiff. He funded the Japanese. He gave them their military. They were like peasants. He gave them an Imperial Navy, an Air Force, and they attacked Russia to take that country down. We did that, but not we, Americans, not me, not you. The people who run it, the people who run America, staged that war. They overthrew it. They slaughtered the Tsar and his family. They slaughtered millions of Christians like us. They're Orthodox mostly. That's irrelevant. They did it because they're Christ followers. They slaughtered them. They blew up churches. That came from Americans. That's Jacob Schiff. Please, but you've never heard of Jacob Schiff, okay? Now, Stalin, they hate Stalin because Stalin was a true communist, but he realized they're destroying Russia. When Stalin came to power, he was a part of a lot of the slaughter, and he believed in a lot of it, but he stabbed these people in the back. Their man was Trotsky. Trotsky was supposed to become Stalin. He was supposed to become the dictator of the Soviet Union. But it was Stalin. Stalin staged a coup and eventually killed Trotsky and purged a whole bunch of these internationalists. Let's say that. They were funded by these bankers, and he became a true communist state. And it's crazy, too, because he did two other things you've never heard of. Did you know that he outlawed abortion when Stalin came to power? So he actually reversed this New World Order's policy, which he realized was just destroying Russia. He reversed abortion, and he actually reversed no-fault divorce. He said it's just devastated our society. So Stalin was a wicked dude, but that's not why you hate him. You hate him because they hate him, and they educated you. That's their archenemy. Not because he's evil. That's not why they hate him. Because Trotsky and Yagoda was worse. They're both worse. Okay, Trotsky was a vile animal, and so was Yagoda. They're much worse, but you've never heard those names before. Gosh, it's interesting. I think I was reading it was like it was Israel Times or something, and they were talking about Yagoda. That's the first time I ever heard of them. They're like they called them, and this is Israel, okay? This is the nation of Israel writing this story, so it's not anti-Semitic or anything like that, but they call them the Jewish Hitler, and they're like, Jews need to look at our own black, history, our own stain on history, and he was talking about Yagoda. I'm like, who's this Yagoda? So that's why they hate Trump. Yeah. So, Trump opposed the New World Order, and they're going to make an example of him, and they're going to crush it, and it's become a name of infamy, just like Nazi is a name of infamy. The Nazi Party was anti-Semitic, absolutely, and it was unjustified. But you have to understand the history of where it came from. It didn't just come, they want you to believe it just came out of nothing. It just came out of nothing. But actually, and I don't know how much I can say, but I'll say this, Jewish leadership overthrew Germany in World War I. That's a historical fact. Look up the Spartacus League. And the Soviet Union was, of course, overthrown by Jewish communists. That's a historical fact. If you want to I'm just going to go because I'll get banned someday anyway. So, like if you look at Winston Churchill, look up a letter, Winston Churchill, Zionism versus Bolshevism. Look that up. Read that letter. That's all I can tell you. Read that letter. Zionism versus Bolshevism. Winston Churchill was a Zionist. He was backed by Jews in England, so he's not anti-Semitic, but read what he says about the Russian. It's a different narrative. You think Hitler was just some troll who came out of nowhere and had all this hate in his heart because he's a racist and a eugenist and stuff. There's a lot more to that story. There's a ton more to the story, guys. The Nazi League was anti-Semitic. I think it was evil, but it didn't come out of thin air. And then, of course, the fascist, we have that term. That term lives in infamy. The Fascist League was just the anti-communist league. It was basically Italy. It was Spain. It was Germany, and they were trying to oppose the Soviet Union. And that term now lives in infamy. Fascism, yeah. And guys, this is more than I should tell you. This is the stuff that would get me in trouble, but please look it up. Those attorney generals are not Christian that charge the Catholic Church. They're not Christian. That's all I'm going to say. So when you're teaching your kids, it's really important you think and you don't regurgitate what you've been told. And it's important you use your mind. You don't live in a free country. Okay, they're gaslighting you. Would you say like the land of the free and stuff? No, not at all. You don't live in a free country. We are taxed to death. Our children must go to government schools. We just barely won the right to teach our own children. Just recently, that was like, I think in Idaho, it was like, I guess it's been like 30 years or something. But think about that. For a long time, you couldn't even teach your own children. They had to go to a government school. And the government tells you, that's because we want to make sure they can learn how to read, as if we couldn't teach our kids how to read. But of course, it's about indoctrination. We do the same thing everywhere we go. We go to Afghanistan, the first thing we do is like set up schools. And then the terrorists like attack the schools and stuff. And we're like, look, they don't want their kids to learn. But of course, education is a weapon. Education, the Babylonians, the first thing they did when they took all the kids, they took over Israel, they took all the kids and took them to Babylonian schools, put them in school. Education is a weapon when it's being used against you, okay? They know that. It's indoctrination, it's programming. So we set up those schools. We do that on purpose to separate the children from the parents. From a military, it's great perspective because we get the children alone. We can question them. We can find out about their parents. It's great for setting up a network. So when you hear that in the news that, they don't like the school, the kids learning, whatever, just understand that from a military perspective and psyops and having somewhat of a background in the special operations community, even though I didn't finish the Green Beret training, I did a lot of it and I got to see a lot. And I know that we set up those clinics and stuff like that to gather information. We separate I don't even know how much I'm allowed to say. I don't know. I mean, I think that was just common knowledge. Okay. It's common knowledge. So I could probably go on and on, guys, but I'm going to try to kind of wrap this up and bring it back in. So just understand when you're studying history, you have a perspective. There's a perspective. So you have the English perspective because we're an English speaking country. We can't read French history, for example. The French have a different perspective on some of these wars, right? When I grew up, I'm French, kind of. I didn't know that until later in life. I mean, I always kind of consider myself English. I think my mom was English, and you just think, we live in America. We all come from England. I didn't realize how many Spanish people were here, obviously, because we annexed all their countries. I didn't realize that. Anyway, so my perspective of French people was pretty poor. It's like, man, these guys are just total losers. They're just idiots. Like, they get slaughtered at this thing and the great English and stuff. And then, like, after a while, I'm like, wait a second, I'm French. And you start reading, like, translations, like French history. Like, they have a totally different perspective from the English, okay? And it's really important to see both sides. Don't believe the character that they make, the straw man that they make. Hitler was evil. But that's not why his name lives in infamy. His name lives in infamy because he crossed those people. He crossed the New World Order, okay? I promise you. There's lots of evil people in the New World Order. Look up, Abu Ghraib. Look up Abu Ghraib. You want to see what America does? You think that was an accident? You look at England, what Private England did. They slapped her wrist. I think she got 6 months of light duty, cook duty, after raping, molesting, the most vile things you can imagine to the we call them terrorists, so it doesn't matter, right? But she did the most vile things to those soldiers and raped them. I think they crucified one guy. I believe they tied him up in his cell, just hanging there. He was screaming. I remember that there was reports he just started screaming all night, and then he died. They crucified him in his cell. She got 6 months, and the military's like, this is outrageous, like as if they didn't know what was going on. We are not the people you think that we are. It's really scary. I titled this, I think I said Raised by Wolves somewhere. That was going to be the theme. It's because I saw this commercial for a new film. It's a Hollywood film. It's called Raised by Wolves, and I didn't actually watch it, so I hope I'm getting this right. But it looked like there's this girl, and she's a teacher, and she's teaching the children. That's why they refer to Trump as Hitler then. And on the way, you initially thought referring to Hitler was like, what do you, doesn't make sense. They want to stain him. He's opposed them now. They're going to destroy him. And the funny thing is, you're like, you can take it two ways. You could say either Trump is really bad, or you can say, wait a second, Trump isn't bad. Are you saying Hitler's not bad? Like, what are you trying to say, you know? Because I just saw it with my own eyes. Don't gaslight me. Trump is not Hitler. Trump didn't kill 6 million people. I'm not even going to go there. So Trump didn't, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're totally... Yeah, I mean, Trump is being punished because he opposed them. And you know that. We didn't have any wars. It wasn't mass genocide. This COVID thing, it certainly wasn't his fault, no matter how you look at it. He didn't send it here. Our death toll isn't necessarily any higher than any other countries. But yeah, they're going to destroy him. So, gosh, I'm all over the place. If you guys have questions, just answer. I think that's the most important thing, Brendan. I want to be really careful what I say too, especially for new viewers, because I think, dude, who is this guy teaching my kids? I promise, read the books, guys, and I try to teach more mainstream history. I do, but I will never tell you how to think. I'll tell you what we know Hitler did, what he didn't do. I'm not going to tell you if he's good or bad. I'll tell you about the Revolutionary War, and I'll let you decide. But let me give you an example. It like hit me when I was older about the Sons of Liberty. Well, they were good, right? Because they were on our side in the Revolutionary War. They went on to a boat, the Tea Party. They dressed up like Indians. That should be right there. That's not cool. Make it look like Indians did it. But they dress up like Indians. They paint their faces. They go on, and they take these merchant cargo tea, and they throw it in the harbor. And that's okay because we didn't want to pay a tax. I think it was like a 3% tea tax, okay? Is that okay? I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but I'm saying I always knew it was right. And I used to even tell people, like, use that example in history to be like, well, see, even our founding fathers did it and stuff. And then you look back and you're like, wait a second, I thought that was right because it was taught. And that was like, but if you really think about it, would I do that over 3% tax? Go down to my local store that's charging this tax, not from their own doing, it came from Parliament, and just burn the store to the ground? I don't know, like we have to rethink who the heroes are. And maybe it was necessary. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm just saying that we can't assume it. We have to, I will only teach your kids the facts. I'm not going to tell them whether it's good and bad. People have gotten upset with me because I've taught the truth about Martin Luther. I teach the good. I think it was good. He tried to hold the Catholic Church accountable, but I'm not going to be apologist for him. He did a lot of bad things to Protestants. People think he's just anti-Catholic. You know who it was crazy the other day. I was talking to this person. They love Luther. They love him. They celebrate him all the time. They love Luther. God bless Martin Luther, okay? But they're Baptist. And I'm like, that is so ironic. It's so ironic that you're a Baptist and you hate the Catholic Church, but you love Luther, okay? Luther slaughtered you guys. He slaughtered the Anabaptists, okay? He considered you the spawn of Satan. He wrote about you guys. He hated you guys. But again, the history's been whitewashed. And Martin Luther did stand up to the Catholic Church, and that's why he's a hero, because the New World Order likes him for that reason. But Martin Luther was no friends to, non-denominational. No friends to us. He was no friends to the Calvinists. He was no friends to what would be today's modern Baptists. And yet they celebrate the guy. They don't even know their own history. Like, he hated you. I think he killed a lot of you, and he supported it, okay? At any rate, that was a side note. I knew that Hitler killed people, didn't know he opposed them, so that's the connection I'm seeing now. Yeah, you should see it. You should read Hitler's stuff. I've read Mein Kampf. Again, I'm probably not allowed to say this on Facebook anymore. I certainly don't want to radicalize or be an apologist for him. And that's the thing is, if you teach true history and you're not like, he was the spawn of Satan and he was the most evil and the whole thing, and just like over the top like a propaganda poster, then you're an apologist for the guy. If you just teach true history. Like Stalin is no friend of mine. He killed so many Christians. He was a part of that. He was a wicked man. He certainly deserved to die. I imagine he's being judged in hell right now. That's Stalin. And at the same time, he's not the character that that was represented to me growing up. He did end abortion. He did end no-fault divorce. His purge, so you hear about and you hear about Hitler. They're like the purge, and Trump might do the same thing, the purge, right? And they're all talking about the purge. Like, there's another side of that story, you guys. Okay, remember, Germany was just overthrown at the end of World War I. That's why they lost World War I. They got slaughtered. The New World Order was going to turn them into a slave state and tax the out of them, take all of their money basically, and they couldn't do enough, so they had to print more money, and basically there's rapid inflation. They could have piles of money, couldn't buy bread. They didn't do that to themselves. The Wall Street bankers and London bankers did that to punish them, to turn Germany into a slave state. So he rebelled. That's the facts. And then they're like, okay, I'm going to be an apologist. I don't care because I'm going to teach true history, okay? And this is shocking to me when I start reading. I'm like, and then he invaded countries. He invaded the Rhineland. And then you realize, like, wait a second. Like, he invaded Germany. It would be like if during the war, like, let's say we lost to Japan, okay, in World War II. And then Japan's like, okay, from now on, like, California and these countries is a separate country. And they divide up America to make us weak. And then eventually we have a strong leader who comes back and he restores the military. And he's like, guess what? We're taking California back and we're taking, Texas back because this is America, right? Many of the people, and if you watch The Sound of Music, and that's my favorite propaganda film. I love The Sound of Music. It's the most beautiful film to this day. Like, it's one of my favorite, The Sound of Music, most beautiful film ever, okay? But it shows them invading Austria and stuff. And you don't realize and it kind of shows the people that were pro-German in Austria is like these evil people and they're mean and nasty. But actually, there was tons of Germans in Austria. It was a unification. It was one people. It'd be like the United States. Like, yeah, I'm Idaho and you're Texas, but we have some sort of unity in America. And the German people had that with Austria and Prussia and those German states. And so he's trying to unite them. And I'm not allowed to say that anymore. See, I'm not even allowed to say, like, teach real history, because if I do, I'm an apologist for Hitler and they'll destroy you. I try to teach the real history of the Confederate. I'm not a Confederate. I had nothing to do with it. I was one of you guys. I dressed up as Abraham Lincoln. I'm in a newspaper in 6th grade as Abraham Lincoln. The first book report in 3rd grade I ever did was on Abraham Lincoln. I was a huge fan of him. And I knew the Confederates were evil. And I grew up in Lawrence, Kansas. Okay, Lawrence, Kansas hates the Confederacy. Okay, when I was in middle school, because the Confederacy, well, there was a border war between Missouri. But Missouri, anyway, another story. But I grew up very, 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 like, pro-Union, and the Confederates were evil. And then I got to prep school, and they, like, start teaching history. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it just shocked me. Like, I just opened my eyes, and I'm like, oh, and I didn't even believe it. I'm just like, no, where are you getting this stuff from? And they're just, like, teaching real history. But public schoolers don't get any real history. They just get this character. And someday they're going to learn that Trump was Hitler. He put little kids in cages. He killed everybody with COVID because he didn't take it serious or something. And, and he, I don't know what else he did. He was going to blow everybody up, and he was friends with dictators. But you saw it with your eyes. Trump is not Hitler. He's not you know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying they've done that to all of history. And so you need to let your kids know that when you teach history. Many of the villains that you read in history are not the characters, and then we have evil on our own. And they want you to believe that America is evil now, and you're evil. That your history is evil, and Christian history is evil, and stuff like that. So they're bringing these skeletons out of the closet to denigrate us, but we had nothing to do that. Eugenics was bigger in America than in Germany. I found that was shocking. Oliver Wendell Holmes, right? Total eugenicist, right? Now they're saying that was America, and America cried. That wasn't me. That had nothing to do with me. That was them, their cult. And now they're going to use their mess and demonize our country so they can topple it and continue to form this tighter and tighter union, New World Order. In simple terms, New World, a few agents of the enemy, and Satan. Yeah, in simple terms, I mean, it's Satanism. It's really Satanism, and you're seeing it come full turn. They started with religious freedom, and that was supposed to be among Christians, that we tolerate different denominations and stuff. And now all of a sudden it's Satanists in the school teaching your kids after-school programs. That's a real thing. They have after-school Satan programs for kids now. And they say, oh, freedom of religion. If you can teach Jesus, we can teach Satan as if they're equals. And see, we bought that too. That was a godly value, that godly men founded this in this country, and that's why they gave us religious freedom, as if that was God would want. You read the Bible, he doesn't talk about religious freedom a lot in there. Actually, God's pretty intolerant towards other religions, especially satanic ones that kill children and do all sorts of evil things. But then again, now the Catholics who took over South America, right? They're the evil ones because they invaded and they overthrew the Aztecs. But the Aztecs were cutting the beating hearts out of little children. They worshipped an evil sun god. What was replaced, Catholicism or some version of Christianity, was superior to that. And I'll defend that all the time. If your culture is cutting the beating hearts out of children, you deserve to be overthrown. And I think what happened was a good thing. If I was an Indian in South America, I would be grateful to have that the Catholics came over and shared the gospel. I would be grateful that I was no longer sacrificing my children and I had received the gospel message. See what I'm saying? I am French, and if you know the history of the French, we've become very Christian, right? But we were barbarians. We were like those Aztecs at one point. We were involved in child sacrifice. We were totally in the dark. And then thank God, first the Jews, And then the Romans colonized us and taught us Christianity, and we saw the light of the gospel. I'm grateful to that. I'm grateful to have been conquered by Christians and my history, and then we became icons of Christendom. Anyway, that was a lot. I don't know if it was just a ramble. It's all over the place, guys. I hope I haven't said anything offensive. I know I've opened some cans of worms tonight, and I'm probably not supposed to. And if this is your first video, you're probably thinking, who is this guy? Like, what have I stumbled into? People unfollow me. That's fine. I do a better job in my books of making my case. They're not as radical. And most of the stuff we talked about tonight is because you guys have asked about like true history and stuff. Most of the stuff we talked about tonight will be in the last book. Some of it will be in the next book, Power, but the last book will be Good and Evil or Enemy. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but that's going to be where I reveal this takedown. And it is so glad to catch your live stream. Love the one about your military school experience. Can't wait to read your books. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I think, and the books aren't like this, you guys. This is a little bit more conspiratorial. And by the way, the fact that you don't believe in conspiracies, that's on purpose. It's because like there was this huge conspiracy and they killed Kennedy, and everybody knew that somebody killed Kennedy. And President Kennedy, and then so the CIA, and that's well documented, the CIA like started putting this out in the media like conspiracy theory, crazy conspiracy theory, and it just kind of went away. And now if anything sounds suspicious like Jeffrey Epstein, it's conspiracy theory. Come on, you know it, you saw it with your eyes. Conspiracy, they work in conspiracy, it's their mode of operation, and they've convinced every American it's not possible, it doesn't happen. If it sounds suspicious, looks suspicious, smells suspicious, it's not true, because that would be a conspiracy theory. But the books are very good, and none of this is about the conspiracy. The books is about public education, how it harms children. The next book, of course, is education. It's to show you how the elites are educating their children. I'm going to add to this book. I've got other things I want to put in there, of course. I'm getting these out as quick as I can, though. Character is how you train your children's character for greatness. It's like the lost art, you know. And then the next book is Power. Power is going to be powerful. This is where I give you the weapon. Like, we want to get you out of the school system, deprogram you. We want to get you a good education, good mind. We want to get you a good character, spirit, strong character, godly character. I have to do that first before we give you power. The next book is Power. I'm going to show you how you can have real power. Not this law of attraction, mumbo jumbo nonsense. Think and grow rich, like just junk. New Age, spiritualism, all that stuff is junk. I'm going to give you like the roots of power. Some of it, like the evil has their own power. And I'm going to talk about this right in the beginning of Power. Evil has their own power, and we're seeing it. They can lie, they can slander, they can call you a pedophile, they can falsely accuse you and prosecute you. They can steal your money. They've taken so much money from the Catholic Church using these allegations that go back 40, 50 years. Many of these allegations, by the way, were just totally debunked in other countries. Like they were investigated by police and stuff. And then they said, well, there's no crime. There's no evidence of a crime. And then they're still going back now and saying, that's just evidence that you covered it and you're moving these people around who are accused and stuff. And so they just continue the narrative that if you're accused, you're guilty. So they have their own power, and it's destructive. They can lie about you. They can slander. They have two systems of rules that they can use. They can stab you in the back. Like that's all the power of evil. They can lie, cheat, and steal. But goodness, God gave us our own powers, and we have our own strengths. Goodness is stronger than evil, and we're going to tap into that, the power of goodness. And hopefully, if your kids they're out of school, they get the right education, they have the right character, and we arm them with power, they can start taking down this enemy. Because right now, the Christian church, to me, it's embarrassing. We become so weak and so pathetic. We attack our own. We destroy our own. We're the most vicious. You ever want to see a Christian be militant? Show them another Christian from another denomination or something, and they get militant. They get nasty. Just evil, right? And they love to denigrate other Christians. But show them a Satanist, and then they're like, we just need to love on that guy and show it. Where's the kindness? God talked about kindness. It just blows my mind. The night and day difference, how hateful Christians have become towards their own, just tear each other down. And our churches are so weak. I see these people I went to Bible college with even. And it's just like, there was a time when we wanted to stand up. If you read the book, we wanted to stand up for babies in this country that have been slaughtered. They're being murdered by this new world order. And we wanted to speak out because God commands it. If you've read the book, I give that example. God commands it. You are to love the least of these. And in our society, it's unborn babies. They have no right to life. They don't even have a right to a painless death. They take a serial killer, because this is how you know it's Satanism. They take a mass murdering, rapist, pedophile serial killer, and you'll see the liberals come out and they're crying and they don't want the death penalty. That's cruel and unusual. But you take a little baby and we're like, can we at least use pain medication where we cut them to pieces and throw them in waste? But you're humanizing babies, unborn babies. and they hate that. Like, they're straight up Satanists. I just went on another tangent. I don't know what I was saying, but anyway, the last book is power. So once you're good, we're going to empower you, and I do think good. I do still believe that good can triumph evil, but with the abortion thing. But then I see them speaking out. Whenever a Christian is like speaks out publicly or like supports Trump, like they condemn them. They're like, you need to be more tolerant. You need to like use softer language and be weak. It's like our own Christian pastors are always weakening. Every time we get that righteous sense of indignation and we want to fight, our pastors are like, no, calm down, like be limp-wristed and weak, and Jesus is the Prince of Peace, right? Every time that righteous sense of indignation wants to go to war, we get pacified, and we're told to be weak and lay down. When we see evil. But then when we see good, like other Christians of different denominations, and their doctrine isn't perfect or something like that, then you see the lion come out in Christians. They want to rip that person to pieces. I just can't believe it. And we've been so divided, and this was intentional. We've been so divided, our churches, the followers of Christ, and we battle each other. We've been divided, and they've conquered us. A small minority of bankers have now taken over the world, and they use Christians to slaughter Christians to do it. It's really depressing. It's really sad. But if we could have that unity in Christ again, and I'm going to teach you the power, the good powers, we can overcome evil. That's my hope anyway. All right, guys, I don't know what the point was. I was all over the place. Teach your kids true history. Oh, the question was, where do you find true history books? I don't know. If you can find them, let me know. There's some great historical resources. We use this program, Liberty Kids. Do I think it's propaganda, liberty doctrine propaganda? Sure. But it's introducing my kids to the characters, and they're learning stuff. They're learning about the Civil War. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you go to Blue Manor Academy, everything is written from an English perspective. Like Charles Dickens wrote a history book. It's an English perspective. It's very anti-French. It's, poor me. It's anti-Spanish. It's like anti all of rest of Europe, right? But it's pro-English. That's fine. It's still giving you a narrative of history. We can use that. And just let your kids know, hey, this is from an English perspective. These events did happen, but the French might have a slightly different opinion, and you can start teaching it, okay? And you get to World War II history and stuff like that. I may dabble in that someday. When we teach it, we'll teach the true history. I'm not going to be apologist for either side, because, by the way, we committed some absolute atrocities. Not me and you, but the people in charge committed some absolute atrocities against the Germans. It's funny too, because we're like, those evil people, the Germans, they bombed London. They bombed civilians in London. They're monsters. And then I was so shocked when you learn later, you studying it, like, wait a second. No, that was in retaliation. We bombed their cities. We did that. Churchill did that. Our hero, he did that. He bombed their cities. He bombed Dresden. They killed so many women and children. We bombed their cities, and then they retaliated. But you never heard that part. Okay, the Germans, they dared to cross the New World Order. And they were evil. I'm not saying that they were good. But again, they crossed the New World Order. So evil and evil can go to war too. It's not always good and evil, okay? Let's say evil and evil went to war, and they crossed the New World Order, and now they will live in infamy. And they're only taught that everything that they did. You watch, what's that movie? So disgusting. Inglourious Bastards. You watch that movie, and they're taking baseball bats to German, and every German soldier is like a character of a savage, like hate-filled, like racist Nazi, and so you can just bash their brains in with a baseball bat. And I'm telling you, a lot of those Germans were just totally defeated after World War I, destroyed. They were looking to unify their country. They were devastated. They were broke. Their family was all killed in the war, and they were just German soldiers, just like us. And we've made them into just like the most, like, we've just so dehumanized them. We do the same thing. There's a lot of world war. My wife is Vietnamese. They did the same thing to the Vietnamese. Just totally just mocked the Vietnamese and made them a character to hate and massacre them. Now I'm looking at my children. I'm like, dude, they're part of Vietnamese children. And they're human beings, and the war machine is so evil. These people are ruthless to their enemies, ruthless. We did the same thing to Japanese. They armed the Japanese to take down the Russians, and then then in World War II, the Japanese come to war with us, and then we turn them into this. They go from being same with the Soviet Union, right? During the war, like, we hated them, and then they became these glorious Soviet Union, and we loved the Soviet Union. And then after the war, we turned them into a character again. I recently thought about how even in the kingdom of darkness, they must be infighting because the souls are on the line. Yeah, and that's the good thing about evil too. That's their weakness, is evil eats its own, okay? Evil parents can't raise good, strong children. In the end, if you look like at Hollywood, a lot of these people, their children become degenerate because evil can't reproduce itself. Evil eats its own children, sacrifices its own children. You look at abortion, they murder their own children. Evil is weak. It should die out. It would die out if we didn't give our children up to the public school system to make new evil kids. You know what I mean? Like, they kill their own. They don't want any kids. It's just darkness. Evil leads to death, and it slowly atrophies the person, and they self-destruct. Evil purges itself out of the world, but it's found a system to reproduce itself through public education by taking our little sweethearts and turning into them, see? But ideally, God has given all power to us, to our families. It's strong, but they've hijacked it. Does that make sense? In other words, evil will naturally kill itself off. Unfortunately, they found a way to take our children, and then they just slowly destroy them over time. So anyway, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. It's all over. If this is your first video, this isn't always what we do. Mostly we're going to talk about raising your kids for greatness. We're going to talk about character development and education. Next week, I'm probably going to talk about everybody wanted to know about sibling rivalries. Yeah, like suicide, Janine, is so rampant. That's where evil leaves. It actually expunges itself for the world. When you get, that's a different topic. But you cannot live that lifestyle. You look at transgenderism and homosexuality, and they have such a high suicide rate. When you give yourself over to evil, you naturally hate yourself. It's crazy. You become a drug addict. You become a sex addict, and you start to hate yourself, and you'll end up you'll want to take yourself out of the world. Evil destroys itself. The only reason it's so thrived is public education, because they don't even have their own children, right? Or they have like one children, whatever. But dude, we're having I love good people want children. They love. It grows the family. We have 7 children, and they'll all be like conservative Christians. They'll love God. But if I put them in the public school, they'd hijack it and take that, and then they'd slowly destroy my children, just eat their souls down. So yeah, the public school system, in my opinion, is the worst abomination of all. Anyway, because they repeat evil. So, but the point is that's not usually what we talk about. Next week, we're going to talk about civil rivalries. A lot of people new in the group want to know about sibling rivalries, how to deal with that. We don't really have an issue in my home. I have a great way to deal with it. I actually learned this from military school. When there'd be like two guys get in a fight or something like that, like I'll tell you how to break sibling rivalries in your home and how to get everybody on the same page team. That's next week, okay? And then from now on, all of this stuff, this history stuff, I can't talk about it anymore. We'll be purged from Facebook. Probably already going to get purged if we get big. We'll be going online, and I'm going to start on Blue Manor eventually in the masterclass. I have a mom's library. I'm going to start doing videos on that and showing you guys this stuff. Not just talking about it. I'm going to show you. I'm going to teach you. You're going to see the history. I'm going to show you the dates and the images and the pages and give you the resources, so what I'm saying can start to make sense and come together. I know you've never heard this stuff before, and it's because you have 2 narratives, left and right, but they come from the same source, and so they end up leading in the same direction. Yeah, it's just evil. It's just self-loathing, and it destroys itself. And I actually don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's good that evil becomes weak, and it weakens itself, and it eats itself, because it slowly takes it out of the world. I almost think it's like God's design to just take evil out of the world. And if they didn't have the public school system, that's why evil always collapses eventually. Unfortunately, they're turning everybody evil through the public school system. Like, evil owns the public school system. So, all right, guys, that's it. I talked too long. I hope you got something out of that. I hope it was helpful. Next week, talking about sibling rivalry, and we're off of kind of the crazy history stuff. All right, guys, thank you so much. If you have questions, leave them. I always answer your questions. Your questions are the priority. Our free month is up. I really need to log in again. Yeah, Brenda, I mean, it's not there yet, the site, but it's rapidly getting better. And I'll start doing those live classes very shortly. Like, we are organizing. I know it doesn't seem like a lot's going on, but we have people, we have teams working on it. I would really appreciate it. And I'll do these talks in the group, and I'll do them better than just random talks. Like, I'll actually teach classes and show you guys this stuff. So, because I know, like, you've never heard of Ugoda. Look Ugoda up tonight. Look up Jacob Schiff tonight. Please look up Jacob Schiff tonight, okay? He's the guy that basically funded and controlled World War I and overthrew the Tsar. And when you think of little Anastasia being stabbed and bludgeoned to death in the Soviet Union, and you think of the Christian churches being built up, just remember that started at Wall Street. That came from Wall Street bankers, a cabal. They did that. They're our enemy. And then that's the last thing with that. I never finished about the movie being raised by wolves, did I? I'm all over. But basically, it's these children, and they're being warned their whole life. They're being warned about this evil that's coming out. I believe is what happened, okay? But this evil is going to come and get them, destroy them, and she's protecting them. But actually, I think she's the alien, and she is the wolf. She's actually taken them. She's the enemy, right? And the people who are coming to rescue, to get them and capture these kids are like their own parents or something, their own people trying to save them. But they're afraid of their own people because they've been raised by a wolf. And that's what happened to us. We've been taught that the Christian church is filthy and evil and committed all of these atrocities. And we're ashamed of our own history. And they're now attacking white supremacy because white European became the hub of Christendom. I'm illustrating this book right now. And it's almost awkward because I'm like, wait, it's all of these white people going into these other countries, and it looks like white people helping black people. And I actually included like Saint Maurice because he's black, and I want to show that it's not about the color of skin, it's about Christendom. But because Christendom became embodied in Western culture because of the fall of the Roman Empire and then the Muslims taking over the East and all this stuff, right? It makes it look like it's a white thing. It's not. It's a Christian thing. And when the brown people in South America got a hold of the gospel, it flourished there until the communists overthrew South America, funded by American bankers. But anyway, that's why you keep hearing this white supremacy. It's code word for Christianity. They hate Christianity. They want to expunge. They want to make all of the Christian heroes like Christopher Columbus evil and degenerate, and then they want to take their people and make them heroes. All the socialists, the communists, they're going to make their guys heroes. We're going to try to flip that at Blue Manor. I want to introduce you. That's why I'm writing this book right now. I want to be great like, and I'm going to tell you all these people from Perpetua to Elizabeth, and hopefully you've heard of Elizabeth and Jim Elliot. But there's a lot of heroes like St. Maurice. You've never even heard of him. Your kids have never heard of him, and he's a real hero. He's twice the man Lincoln was. So, and he's a black Christian, St. Maurice. So it's not about skin color. It's about God. It's about Christendom. That's the true enlightening of all the world. But they want to divide it and make it about skin color or about culture or something like that because they're evil. All right, I'm done, for real. Thank you guys so much. We will talk to you later.